Everybody, I just wanted to chat really quickly about the new Netflix documentary Fit for TV. I guess it's a docuseries. So The Biggest Loser had a 3 episode docuseries kind of going over the history of the show, some of the controversies, and then they interviewed a few of the contestants, one of the trainers, the doctor, and the producers to kind of go over the events and current happenings of the show. Um, my thoughts on it were it was an incomplete narrative, partially because they didn't have Jillian Michaels on one of the important trainers in the Biggest Loser arc. And the other frustrating things are they didn't actually mention there was other trainers throughout the seasons. Um, some of the controversies stopped after about season 15 with Rachel Fredrickson. They ended up having 2 other seasons. They talk about the cancellation of the show, but they actually don't mention the reboot at all that had Steve Cook part of it and Bob Harper as the host. So it was, like I said, an incomplete narrative. It was super interesting that the doctor blames the trainers for some of the mishaps. The trainers, it didn't seem like Bob Harper liked the doctor at all. So he kind of waffles between production and Dr. Huizenga, being the end all be all, but then also contradicts himself and mentions, oh, we were the trainers and no one was going to stop us with our training methods. And they went over a few things like fat burners, the metabolic rate controversies, and a few other like more controversial things like the doctor saying he always had them on a specific calorie limit, but the trainers would override him on that. And it was really telling that all three, the producers, the doctor, and the trainers weren't all in the room together. So I mean, it's just a big old he said, she said. And a few other things they didn't mention were things like, I remember in one of the seasons, Matt, it might have been season 2, used to be a wrestler, and he water loaded and did the whole weight cutting routine for being a wrestler. And he won one of the, I guess you would call it, advantages to be able to do that. And at the time, it was like this super, criminal thing. Oh my God, how could he do that? And they didn't mention that at all. Yet they also show only Tracy Joelle, Danny, and then a few other contestants. And they kind of took arcs like everyone loved Danny. They kind of portrayed Tracy as the crazy character, Joelle as the outspoken character as well. So I wish they had more contestants that they spoke about. And I believe it was Susanna, that was the other contestant that's also had some controversies within the Biggest Loser family. But I mean, I think their experiences are all valid. So I don't want to say, oh, I don't think any of what they're saying is or isn't true. I feel like their perceptions of the reality they faced that none of us faced is accurate to them and what they believe and what they felt. No problems with that. But I wish we had a bigger lens, like 18 seasons and, only 4 or 5 people get interviewed. And where were some of the people like Allie that everyone loved? Having Hannah and Olivia there were great. They were people that everyone really loved throughout the seasons. I did love that Allison, the host, was there. Like, props to her. She still looks wonderful. She was always really positive influence on the show. And there was, I just felt like there were some things missing. And I really wish they would have set the narrative of what the early 2000s weight loss shows were all about. Like, I Live in Canada. We had equally terrible shows like X-Weighted. This trainer, Paul, was like a complete teabag to the contestants, and they would film them in ill-fitting clothes. They make them do a circuit that they just couldn't do. They would roast them on their food choices and then tell them, oh, you're going to die if you don't change your ways. And then, put them through workouts and, have this whole triumphant, successful story. The other shows I used to love to watch were like The Last 10 Pounds Boot Camp, Bulging Brides. Same deal. They would like throw a girl in her wedding dress that clearly isn't going to fit. And then they have a trainer, Tommy Europe, who was super great, super motivational. This nutritionist that looks straight up like Jillian Michaels with a few more tattoos. And, she's throwing the food away, saying it's crap. And of course, like, Tommy puts them through a workout they can't do. Then, they get caught cheating on their diet. Or the bride's version, they would go try cakes for the wedding, or they'd go for the bachelorette and do this punishment workout. And they would do a halfway, like, check-in on the weight. And it would be like, oh, we're so behind. The seamstress would be like, oh, there's slippage here. Oh, I just can't zip her dress up. Like, we can't pretend that reality TV, other than Biggest Loser at the time, was perfect. And I really think it portrayed where we were at in our culture at the time. We still had things like American Idol that set up the stage for having a positive enforcement, a neutral party, and then like a villain. So Biggest Loser was no different in that. Your positive reinforcement was Bob Harper. Allison too. She was always this neutral cheerleader that a lot of people liked. And then you had the villain, who was Jillian Michaels. And then there would be times that Jillian would leave the show, and it was really terrible that that wasn't mentioned more. That like the real mainstay was Bob Harper. Jillian left. I think there was 8 or 9 trainers when I looked it up after watching this series. I mean, there was Anna Kournikova, there was Dolvet Quince, there was Brett, there was, like I said, Steve Cook, and a few others that I just can't remember the names of. Jen from American Gladiators as well. And all were really positive parts of the show, but we're also kind of told to play the same games. The production, it is what it is. It's very standard in reality TV to push the contestants as far as possible. And unfortunately, like, in the 2000s, things were just pushed too far in everything. Like, the other shows we had on TV were Fear Factor, where they tried to scare the contestants, have them eat ridiculous things. Ultimate Fighter was starting. There was just so many things going on that, like, they would film things, even The Apprentice, and you would hear the contestants say later, oh, there's like energy drinks around and no food, or, let's pump them full of alcohol and have all these other endorsements there. But like getting someone like a piece of chicken and feeling great is totally different. I felt really sad for Danny that his weight has unfortunately gone back. Like, it was really sad to hear him say he thinks he's gained and lost like 1,000 pounds. That's probably very valid. Ryan really took accountability to where he was at with his metabolism. And a few of them we got these really quick snippets from in the docuseries, and a few other contestants like Joelle and Tracy were focused on more heavily. And again, I don't really want to comment on their experiences. I thought there was a little too much focus on Tracy's personal life in this. I think they could have focused that time on, again, setting the stage for the 2000s, what reality TV was like as a whole, and just like focus it on The Biggest Loser and not her personal issues. It was really unfortunate that when she ran that first challenge that she did have that instance where like her muscles were essentially like eating themselves. It was like a whole thing. I can't remember the name of it. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a musician, man. Like, I play the bass. So like, it was just unfortunate. And I think the other thing to really take note of is it was a prize for money. They did reboot the show. They don't mention that at all, which was really unfortunate. Like, what really sucks is the last season was really focused on health and wellness, but I think it was just too late in the series. And the challenges were super fun. Like, I remember Bob was the host, Steve and the other trainer were both motivational. They still had last chance workouts, and it was really kind of a place for them to reboot The Biggest Loser. But too much time had passed, too much controversy had passed, and I think people were just over it. And then now we've had the movement of, let's body shame people, let's say this is bullying. And I mean, like, I've trained Muay Thai. I've done some of the more, like, I've only fought a little bit, done a little bit of tournament style, but I have done the harder training. And if you're going to do something where you're like really pushing your body, you're not always going to have an amazing workout. Yeah, like, you may puke during a workout. Not everything they portray as unhealthy, did I agree, was ridiculously unhealthy all the time. In the amount of time they lost the weight, yeah, like, you could say that's unhealthy to maintain. I do think they also didn't focus enough on some of the injuries the contestants got. Like, Jillian and Bob would always say things like, oh, if you don't work out hard enough, I'm gonna like take your arm off and beat you with it, and stuff like that. But meanwhile, they would have like stress fractures and all these other terrible things on their joints and on their body that, like, they're just not used to training through, right? And so they're going to have that injury. And just being a more overweight person, they're actually going to carry more muscle as they start losing weight. But they could also have other injuries, right? That, like, they just didn't know about. Their knees don't work as well, their hips won't work as well. There was one season where they made Bob, I can't remember if the Australian show or the US show, where they made him put on a fat suit and he like whined and cried and died. And I felt like, the trainers just didn't really know how to work with obese people. But it wasn't a super well-known like group of people that were trying to lose weight at the time in the way that we see now. So there's a lot more resources, a lot more scientific knowledge behind that. Whereas they plunked these two trainers from like LA trying to make a name for themselves that were just jumping on all the diets. The thing they really didn't focus on was the fact that a lot of the show was endorsed. So one season they would be like walking to Subway, and their, part of their diet was like, let's eat like half a Subway sandwich. One season I remember like the meal was like soup. And it was like this like 70-calorie low sodium soup was like part of the meal plan because of all the paid endorsements. They had Planet Fitness though, who notoriously had the pizza and bagel days. So I mean, it was just really something that was a product of its time. It would be cool if they rebooted something that wasn't as extreme for as much money. I really don't believe the producers when they say that they would change a bunch of those things. Like, they worked for TV, right? And the other side of the coin is, back when Biggest Loser was on, we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have lots of other outlets to watch things. So that's why you would have like 17, 18 million people watching a show. Even some, I think Biggest Loser had times had like 4, 5, 6 million people, right? Because you just needed something to watch that everyone was going to talk about, to be inclusive within your community. So, like, for me, my weight's bounced around a lot, right? Like, I've been 260 pounds in my adult life. I've been 108 pounds. I've really waxed and waned and done all the right and wrong things. But I think the important thing is, like, when I started watching Biggest Loser, I was at an influx of starting to, gain weight and lose weight. And there was times where it was definitely very inspirational, also very thin inspirational. You'd get tips on like how to, do things a little quicker and maybe not quite as healthy. So I think it'd be terrible to say it was such a write-off, should have never been done, but also to say, oh, it was like a really wonderful show. I just really wish they'd shown more sides of the product and both sides of the coin. And it's interesting that Jillian didn't participate in it. She obviously has her reasons. And you can say what you want about her career, but because of her not being there, I really think it's an incomplete narrative. Dr. Huizinga kind of seems to throw her under the bus. Bob throws her under the bus. The producers stick up for her. I found all that interesting, though. Like, why were they not all in the same room discussing it like a round table? Bob to me came off kind of like a mean girl, which was a little bit disappointing. Especially seeing how he performed on Traders. Like, he was America's trainer, and there was a challenge on Traders where he's like dying going up the hill with like this with another contestant, and they're like carrying this heavy object up the hill, and he couldn't do it at all. So I mean, it was interesting because all the times he would say, just push through and do it and do it, and you're the one. And he had his heart attack and everything like that. And there was a season before he had his heart attack that he looked terrible, and the big advertisement was like whole grain oats or something like that, and so he was just like slamming oatmeal all day. I mean, we're gonna say that guy is the epitome of health, unfortunately, and America just rode that bandwagon. There was other weight loss shows around at the time too that had extreme weight loss, Home Edition or whatever, with Chris Powell. I mean, that show, they also lost ridiculous amounts of weight. And the transformation was longer, but at the same time, like, he would like move into their house and live with them and lose weight. Stuff like X-Weighted was it 4 months or 6 months? I can't remember, but there would always be these like big challenges, like, I'm gonna run a half marathon, or I'm gonna do a whatever circuit, and you're trying to get going to show, like, what I'm trying to say is they're essentially just trying on the show to get them to this goal, right? So I think all those goal-based shows, while wonderful for filming, don't give you the basis for a healthy and happy, long living lifestyle. And stuff changes, right? Like, my diet's changed a lot over like the last even couple of years, just with medical changes in your life, hormonal changes. Like, I'm almost 37 in like a week, so as a female, there's just different things that have changed in my life, and I'm currently like kind of changing my diet up again. But the OOs, the 90s, the OOs, the later 2000s, even now, what's recommended is so different. I mean, tracking macros is great. I don't think they were doing that on Biggest Loser. It was like, hey, as much cardio as possible, woohoo. Like, I'm sure they were probably restricting some water and things like that. I really don't believe the doctor didn't know about the challenges. Like, how do you have a production show that plans out the challenges that the doctor doesn't sign off on? Like, and I'm not calling him a liar. I'm just saying, like, it's just super weird the way that was set up and not explained better. Like, I don't think anyone is a liar. I really think they all believe their version of events. from the trainers to the production to the doctor, but I just don't see how logistically that's possible. Like, you're gonna tell me Tracy ran this whole thing where she, medically gets kind of airlifted out, and the doctor just had no idea that it was happening. Yet one of the show events, I remember that same doctor like ran with them, like they did a marathon or half marathon or something in one of the events, and like Dr. H like joins in with them part of the way. So like, how would you know that one's going on but not something else? And to say like, oh, it was super cruel, they were in like their underwear on the scale, it was super embarrassing. Like, all the shows were embarrassing at that time in the same way. Like, I'm talking about X-Weighted, and even one of the Kardashians had like a revenge body show or whatever. All of them were portraying that like, oh, you don't fit in this thing, this is the goal. I think there was someone on the show, she might have been a publicist or something, that was talking about how it was just trying to portray fat people as being disgusting. And like, there was elements of that, but they didn't even choose the worst examples. Like, I remember one contestant, Darius, like bought his pants in the section where the tents were or something, and like there were certain things that they would do to embarrass people, but it was no different than any other part of reality TV at the time. And like, I never watched Biggest Loser and thought, oh, these people are disgusting, because they would really show the narrative of sort of how they got there, because they wanted you to really believe in the stories and get behind these people. So I think they actually did a really good job, if you go back and watch the seasons, of showing you like the pain points of why these people were overweight, versus being like, oh, they're just all so disgusting. Like, they made them likable characters, other than Tracy, but Tracy really played the game, and I think she admits that. There wasn't as many people doing that. Matt definitely played the game, Matt and Susie. Matt and some of the other contestants just didn't do that. They just didn't really correlate it to like Big Brother or Survivor or another game, right? So that's all I've got. Like I said, I think it's an incomplete narrative. I enjoyed watching it. Like I said, I was a really big fan of The Biggest Loser. A lot of those weight loss or weight related shows. Do you think we can do them now? Like, I think you could. I think it'd be really interesting to do something in the same realm, but maybe have everyone track their macros instead, and look at like different fitness goals to do, and then track them over maybe a year or something. Like, I think it's possible. And I think because we have Netflix and all these other streaming services, we're not trying to flip that narrative like we were in 2004 of, oh, let's just show something really sensationalized on TV. So that's all I got for you. Thanks if you made it this far. If not, I get it. Subscribe if you're here, and I hit a thumbs up and a like. Appreciate you. Bye.